Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Facility Insights Live, Lessons, Challenges, and the Path to 2026. So I want to go ahead and introduce our speakers. We have David Trask, National Director and podcast host for Facility Voices. He's going to be moderating today. We have Maria O'Callahan Cassidy, the Senior Associate VP of Facilities Development and Operations at San Jose State University, and Richie Stever, VP of Real Estate and Construction at the University of Maryland Medical System. We also have Dr. Walter Lamar here with us, Associate VP Facilities Operations and Maintenance at UHealth, and Fletcher Coffman, VP of Operations with the Washington Commanders. So, David, let's go ahead and hand it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Adir, and thank you to all the panelists and also the people who joined us today. I'm humbled to be moderating this panel of literal facilities rock stars, and I really appreciate you all joining today. You know, what we're going to really jump in and talk about is some of the big things that happened this year, and it's been all over the board. And it's impacted everybody differently. That's why we've got such a diverse group on this call of panelists, but we're going to talk about finance and facilities alignment today, some of the challenges we've seen this year and what we're looking at moving forward. Also, institutional knowledge loss, the impact on that in facilities at these different organizations, recruiting and retaining staff. What are some of the things that they're doing? What are some of the things that they're seeing that are working? Then there's the big one here too. It's the AI effect. What are some of the ways that they're seeing AI impacting their facilities today, and the way that they're going to look at integrating some of those AI tools in their toolbox moving forward? Also, access to building information, the importance of getting access to that stuff whenever the heck the team needs it. Also, emergency readiness and doing more with less, how we're responding when something goes sideways. And then the path ahead, what we're looking at for that roadmap moving forward. So let's jump in. So facilities leaders are really faced with a lot of real world challenges, and it really involves a strategic approach to address each one of them. And we're going to talk about this through these different categories moving forward. So let's talk about finance and the challenge and how that's really aligning with facilities. And a lot of institutions are struggling. Budgets are being cut. They're also facing a lot of equipment that's starting to be end of life or it's failing. And then also a lot of renovations that are coming up, and they're looking at how they're going to be replacing some of this. So again, it's that balance of looking at what needs to be upgraded and also what they're just putting Band-Aids on, and also some of those big picture items. So let's jump in here, and Maria, let's start with you. And how are the current economic pressures and things that are going on in the world today, like tariffs and supply chains, really impacting your facilities?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So at universities and colleges across America, I think that they've really had to deal with significant budget cuts, especially with grants going away. And a lot of universities and colleges have not recovered from COVID. Many people thought just by shutting things off that you would extend their useful life, and that's not the case. In many ways, it accelerated their useful the death of those pieces of equipment. So what we're seeing now is a perfect storm where you have equipment that is deferred maintenance, don't have the funding to fix those items, technology changing so rapidly that trying to make a decision on what you should replace and when, overlapping it with master space planning to figure out, hey, listen, what is the right investment? And then making sure that you have good data from day to day, because things age at a very different rate. So you have to overlay real-time data, get the teams to tell you what they're seeing in the field, because it might be number one on your list or number two on your list, but in reality, something that was listed as 2025 is actually, number one on your list. Plus the tariffs and just general construction, we're seeing 30% increases across the board. We have quotes that are 2-3 years old that, quite frankly, you just have to start again. They're just not even they're not even in the ballpark. We're not even in the parking lot tailgating. Like they are just so far off base of what the actual cost is today. So it's a real struggle. And it's also telling the story because a lot of people are still stuck, especially in senior management, with you can just make it work. And really showing them what the risk analysis is, that if we lose these pieces of equipment, what the effect will be on the overall business structure. Not to mention that there's that HGTV effect where people think that, okay, we're going to do this project and it can be done, when you go out to dinner. I know I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not understanding the time frames and what the overall impact of the planning needs to be for some of these systems to be replaced.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
it's a lot of storytelling, it's a lot of risk analysis, and it's convincing people that these investments are needed, and then trying to find the funding. And we're now looking at, like, my business model previously was that if you couldn't do something in two phases, it probably wasn't worth investing in. And now we're looking at large scale projects that you're trying to just fund, and it's going into phases 4 and 5. And then that requires another type of risk assessment and an additional discussion, an additional level of discussions on, by the time we finish this, the technology might be outdated.
Right, right. And we're seeing that all over the country. I'm hearing similar stories too. And Fletcher, what are some of the ways that you're addressing these things?
Yeah, it's definitely not without struggle. I mean, I have the pleasure of taking care of a 30-year-old stadium at this point, with a lot of legacy MEP. We got new ownership a couple years back that, put a large investment in, and we had to be really honest with them about what we could procure in the time frame and what we couldn't, right? Because we're looking at chiller replacement, boiler replacement, switchgear replacement. These things, we've been on the docket for, well over a year. And some of this stuff is hitting now, and working with finance is difficult because at the end of the day, I have to explain to finance what a switchgear actually is. And essentially, working with them, it's had to be, a really collaborative effort to make sure that they understand, what the ramifications of some of these projects, and if we don't do them or not. We run, 60, 70,000 people through this place, 20 times a year. And we also have, one of the most visible products on the planet. So we have the justification, but a lot of times it's, can we actually get it done in the time frame? We got hit with some tariffs earlier this year with some seating products. We're looking to expand in some areas, and we definitely incurred, probably 20-25% extra costs on a lot of things that we were bringing in. But ultimately, we don't really have a choice. We don't really have an option, right? It's an arms race in the NFL. And so making sure that our stadium can at least compete on that national, televised level, is paramount. And, our finance team is, we're basically forecasting this stuff monthly, right? If I know that something's coming down the pipeline, we have to be so proactive, right? So we're sunsetting this building, 4 or 5 years until the new stadium, which is great. 4 or 5 years is a long time. And I think a lot of people don't understand, especially with 30-year-old legacy equipment, things can go severely wrong if we're not planning properly.
Certainly, and things break when they break. I always say that because, it's not on your schedule. It's on when it breaks, and trying to track down that new equipment. And again, you're fighting with other people trying to get some of the same equipment too.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Lamar, share some of your insights here.
So I think healthcare is always one of the unique components where we're almost running a city within the city, no? And one of the components that I frequently get asked is exactly this. And the cost that I don't think is immediately listed, we often think about financial, but the one that probably impacts healthcare more than anything is opportunity. The opportunity cost that I pay for foregoing a piece of equipment or a specific process. Case in point, we have facilities conditions assessments where basically when I'm speaking to our board or our chief leadership, it is how do I relate things that are natural to me as a facilities administrator to a person who is specific to healthcare. So it's like a workup on a patient. Do I provide vitamins and preventative care now, or do I have this surgery later? But we also know that if you don't schedule the equipment for preventative maintenance, it'll schedule itself for you. So it's those types of things that we directly look into. But one of the things that I think is the most helpful that I can say is not only just a facilities condition assessment, but the restore and refurbishment process. How do I make the existing capacity? The older it gets, the better it needs to function, basically. And I know that's kind of like a paradox, but typically, even with age, the more we age, the more you have to pay attention to the things that you didn't quite pay attention to. And you need to give them special attention. And we're doing a lot of that right now to balance out the opportunity cost of what is the grid going to look like and can it support tomorrow?
Yeah, no, I agree. I love that example. Especially like you said, the older we get, the more we pay attention to things. Things hurt more. I'm dating myself here, but at
Mhm.
the end of the
Very much
day,
so.
you take care of yourself more. Obviously, because when you're younger, obviously you're invincible. So,
Mhm.
Richie, share your background, your stories.
Yeah, thanks, David. I think our problem is our technicians are so good. Both the inside technicians, those who are employed by the organizations, as well as our support, the external vendors, at keeping these old pieces of equipment running. They're the modern day MacGyvers, keeping these older pieces of equipment operating, which to finance, if it's not broken, they don't need to fix it, right? But we have very smart technicians telling us, like, look, this thing's on a wing and a prayer, and we have bubble gum and duct tape holding it together, and we need to replace it. So, and what I'm finding successful is changing the vernacular that we've been presenting to finance. So, one item is to talk about the how the item that needs to be replaced is mission critical. What does it do? What happens if the thing goes down? The switch gear, as Fletcher mentioned, right? Not a big deal until you're running no lights in a major playoff games, right? And then the whole world hears about no lights, and so then there's a big knock on the team and both the NFL team as well as the facilities team that supports that building. So how do we avoid those things? Avoidance and or opportunity costs, as Dr. Lamar said, are certainly some things that we need to talk about. So again, what I find successful is talking about the mission critical nature. We are seeing the same things. The data centers here in the Mid-Atlantic, where I am in Maryland, are really impacting cost of goods and labor, more importantly, labor, because we're building big, sophisticated buildings in healthcare, and so are the data centers. They're building really big buildings that are very sophisticated, taking the same talent away at higher profit margins. I just want to mention that to many of you who might not realize that. Speaking of profit margins, Maria mentioned this. We healthcare, higher ed, we're all facing reduced bottom lines. So we're actually operating basically getting the same amount of money with rising expenses, reducing our profit, which our profit then becomes capital that we can reinvest into the organization. And so instead of paying cash for things like we used to, now we have to go out for bonding. We have to get creative with energy service performance contracts and other things, increase philanthropy, go for government money, which the political scene, talk about that for a second. Political scene is really impacting finances, right? Before, people were counting on the Inflation Reduction Act as a way to offset some expenses for capital improvements, particularly on the back of the house. Now that's in question, whether that money is even available. And then on top of that, nationally, we're being asked to move away from, I know this is really controversial, but move away from carbon emissions and natural gas usage. And so again, what does that do to our facilities? How do we improve the electrical that supports our facilities to come off of natural gas or diesel, whatever we're using? So a lot of political pressures out there causing us to do these things. And then lastly, all this is impacted by everything that we do at this panelist is behind the walls. Like we are back of the house. And getting money for back of the house is way harder than something shiny and beautiful on the front of the house, right? We really have to sharpen our discussions and be really diligent in helping finance and boards and executives understand the why, not just the what. And so, so if you learn anything today, sharpen your skills on presenting the why. Again, connecting to mission critical, and you'll be more successful than you possibly have been in the past.
You know, the thing that I heard that was across all the comments here is communication and education, and really educating people on the why. And you're spot on, Richie, and everyone. I think you're trying to justify the expense to people who don't understand that why. And, you know, I've talked to several people around the country about this very thing, and the stories are all over the place as far as how they do it. But what it really comes down to is that communication and connection with the issue. And I love that. Thank you all for sharing. And the next section here really is another challenge that we hear in facilities all the time. It's that institutional knowledge loss. And I love this photo because you've got the guy who's walking out the door with a lot of that institutional knowledge, and look who's in the background. It's all the new people. It's all the younger people that are still left behind. And that stuff that just walks out the door. And this is impacting organizations nationwide, worldwide. I actually just talked to IFMA just the other day about this very thing. And this is a global challenge. And what this can really do is impact an organization after the fact too. When they walk, how long is that person going to answer their phone before they just either change their number or say, stop calling me? Or maybe they get that lucrative, you know, contract where they'll answer their phone for that little contract fee. So again, how organizations are doing this and dealing with this can be really kind of all over the board. So what are you looking at, each of the panelists, as far as how you're addressing that institutional knowledge walking out the door and capturing that beforehand? And especially with that staff turnover. Richie, let's start with you.
Thanks, David. You know, a couple of things I'm personally doing. So one is to do seminars like this, sharing my institutional knowledge with those who might not have seen the storms that I've seen, and helping them through before they see those storms. I say, you know, in order to get promoted for me, you might know how to sail in a storm. I'm a boater, so you might know how to sail in a storm. You might know how to sail, but you don't know how to sail in a storm. So I'm trying to get people the fast track to learn how to sail in the storm, so that when the problems arise, they know how to respond to them. So a couple things beyond doing the webinars like this. A little plug here. Just yesterday, I put an app on the App Store called Facronym. I encourage you guys to download the app. It's 850 plus acronyms that are facilities related. And so, you know, changing the vernacular, helping people understand what the heck we're even talking about is kind of my goal. So again, personal little plug there. And then, you know, I don't oversee all the facilities folks at my hospital. We have 12 hospitals in our system, but I am a resource for the facilities managers should they find themselves in trouble with an item, whether it's a regulatory item or don't know what to do about a piece of equipment that's hurting, and how do they get back up and running quickly. That's my role. But what I've also done is brought all the facilities managers together in a council that allows them to talk through problems. And there's varying levels of expertise on that council with, you know, some that have been here 40 years and some are new to management. And so my idea is to do that informal information transfer at the higher levels, at the management levels, director levels, in order to rise the whole seat. And so again, you know, if you're a seasoned professional, I encourage you to reach down, become a member, a mentor for the younger generation. And lastly, what I try to do is make facilities sexy again. Like, how many times do we hear, oh, go to school, go to school, go to school? I'm telling you that don't go to school, go into trade. We got to get people and our next generation interested in the work that we do, because the work that we do is sexy. We have, just look at this panel, amazing hospitals, amazing schools, amazing stadiums that we all manage every single day. Without us, those things don't work. And so that's what I'm trying to do. Again, make facilities sexy again, and keep promoting our craft, because what we do is valuable to the community, and it's personally enriching.
Love that. And thank you for sharing that. Dr. Lamar.
So I agree, right? I'm a component theoretically. Sometimes if you just reverse the word order, you can bring a lot of information, meaning, how do we preserve institutional knowledge? The way that I'm addressing it is, quite frankly, by starting out with knowledge of my very institution. So how do I go about doing that? We have what's called, there are 100 and more or less 45 different sites scattered across South Florida that I'm responsible for. So anytime I'm bringing on a new employee, I start with institutional knowledge and knowledge of the institution, meaning they start out at the farthest most satellite with the lowest impact. The next promotion is closer, that has more of a risk, before they can move to our actual hospital system, which is at the highest level of risk. So what is that doing for us historically? Well, one, it's allowing the individuals who are already at the highest risk level to, one, take care of the individual from the same facility that they just came through. So you understand the business theoretically, you understand the business from a personal perspective, but you've also worked progressively at higher levels. So once you're at that very top level, then it's time to start giving back. Meaning those individuals that are retiring out, guess what I turn them into? You are now the designated trainer. All of this institutional knowledge that we're trying to preserve, I want to make sure that it is preserved in the right place. Well, what does that mean? When we look at knowledge, knowledge flows on a continuum. I can tell you just by from my PhD, it is a continuum of known knowns, what we know and what we will immediately see, known unknowns, what we know today that might not be known tomorrow. That is our current, what is going on today, the facilities that we're designing today, how will they look, what will they need? But the biggest component of preserving institutional knowledge is that not all the time does the historical knowledge meet up with the knowledge of the unknown unknowns, meaning the future of what healthcare look like, what would the facilities look like. Those are the things that are probably more difficult. And the way that we do it is a lot of, we re-socialize. As the institution changes, our training components are changing with it. The systems are changing with it. And what you're seeing now is very, very smart technicians that are almost IT professionals at what they do, because everything is controlled by a system, and the system still is artificial when it comes to intelligence.
No, I agree. I think everybody's just really trying to figure it out site to site to site too, but learning your building, learning your sites is a key component of that too. And Fletcher, how are you addressing this?
So when I came into this role in 22, I came in right after a complete overhaul, right? So we truly lost 26 years of knowledge. And we are, in season 4 and probably just stabilized last year from it, right? Um, and we have an engineering staff here, and I think the first thing that I tried to do was generalize that organizational chart for cross training, right? We're basically building our institutional knowledge now, right? Because we don't know what we don't know, right? That's the running joke with the staff is, people say, "Hey, how do we feel about Sunday?" Well, we don't know what we don't know, but so far we feel okay, right? So we've learned as we've put out fires, and after every fire, right? It's after action notes, right? We review what happened, we review the cause, what we could do to stop it next time, what place, what you know anti-leak valve, right, thing that we can put into place to make sure it doesn't happen again. But again, back to, generalizing the org chart, we were set up to where, you know, we have a plumber who just does plumbing, right? We have an electrician just does electrical, so on and so on. We don't do that anymore. Everybody does a little bit of something, right? And the way we do that is when we build the preventative maintenance program, we don't just pump out tickets, this is a plumbing call, we're going to send it to the plumber, right? Sometimes that gets sent to the electrician, right? And that's a training moment for them, right? They understand how to change a flush valve or how to do something, similar to what the other engineers are doing. And that's been very helpful, right? I think that, our fires are very, again, visible, right? And so that's, goal one is don't end up on TV for something terrible, which we have in the past. And, I'll say that, some of the issues that have come out of the stadium are based off institutional knowledge loss. Um, and that's scary, right? And, I'm sure everyone on this panel has been through something like that and not knowing what could happen based off, someone who, back to Richie's point of MacGyvering something and running it for 20 years and doing the special, turn this knob, pull this lever. You don't know who's doing that. And, I do push ownership on a lot of the staff, but I push cross training a lot harder, just to ensure that everyone's on the same page and we do this as a team. Again, back to Richie's point, right? You got to make this sexy. And, I lead with a very, athlete mentality with the team, right? We take care of an athletic squad here and we function as a team just so.
I appreciate you sharing that insights. And Maria.
I wanted to say I agree with everything that the panel is saying. It is, brain drain is something that is really problematic, especially in the facilities field, and all those secret tricks that the old timers have to getting things operate. When that walks out the door, you can really be in a pickle. So, my recommendation is you can't wait until they announce their retirement to start documenting all of these things. And then, I like the idea of having postmortems. We try to do them as much as possible. And the real message here is to be disciplined and allow time for that. So often we're understaffed and we are just responding to things as if we're firefighters. But as leaders, we have to create the space to have those discussions, after incident discussions, and making sure that we're scheduling folks appropriately so that it allows time for cross-pollination. So much of that knowledge is transferred in the field, usually during situations, and getting new folks that are coming in the opportunity to work alongside individuals that have that perspective and have worked on things and have had to deal with emergency situations is key. So it's really just creating the platform and the process to allow those things to happen organically is the best way. But it has to be very intentional. So, documenting is key, and having a place to retain that knowledge is key. And that can look like very different things depending on where you work. But again, finding the time to do it is up to the leader to make sure that folks have that opportunity to have those meetings and those interactions.
No, I appreciate you sharing that, all of your insights, and I'm gonna have to speed up a little bit here and we're not everybody's gonna be able to answer all because I know we're up against the clock here, but let's go into the next section here, and it's really interesting how these all tie because it really comes down to people and process. And one of the biggest challenges I hear over and over again, and we've heard this nationwide for years, is recruiting and retaining people. And I posed this question to Richie first because, and again, we're not going to get to everybody on each of the questions moving forward, but Richie, how are some of the ways that you're looking at recruiting and retaining people on your teams?
Thanks, David. I think the key here is to that first introduction that a potential recruit has for the organization is the JD, the job description and/or posting. I think making sure that that's right and accurate, and it reads that this is a fun job. This is an exciting job. I mean, the old resumes sucked. Let's be real. And we really need to improve in order to attract that talent. We need to improve the way those JDs read. I know the next section is about AI. I encourage you to use the AI to improve your JDs, your job descriptions, in order to attract that talent. And then secondly, I don't know how many of you use a recruiter, internal or external, but what's been successful for me is to talk to the recruiter and give them a real sense of who you're looking for, what you're looking for, what talent. And even use your circles with the trade organizations that you participate in, your Facebook posts, your LinkedIn groups that you're part of, leveraging your own network as a leader to find and extract those people who would be beneficial to the organization. One point I used, and you're welcome to use it. I created a building automation system technician position, and what I told the recruiter is, I'm looking for a gamer. Is really what I'm looking for. Because when I described it that way is because if they do something on the computer with the building automation system over here, it's going to have an impact for the other piece of equipment or environment over there. And so they need to know the cause and reaction. And so those people who play those video games, they really understood how to run the BAS, even though they were not building folks who we brought in. But once we educated them, brought them up to speed, as Dr. Lamar said, brought them up to speed, taught them about the building, how a chiller works, how a cooling tower works, how the generator works, etc. They really started to excel. And so don't be afraid to take talent who is not necessarily healthcare or facility specific. You can train your own. It's fine. You just got to get them interested. Once they get in the door, they're not leaving. I'm telling you, like, how many of your healthcare organization or higher ed or stadium staff have long tenures? It's generally not because of the money. It's because of the mission, right? And so we just need to get them interested in the mission, train them up to get them the base skills that they need, and then let them go. I mean, that's what's really been successful for me, David.
I love that. And Fletcher, you're in a little bit different situation because you inherited some of this, and plus you pulled some of that in-house. Share your perspective on recruiting and also retaining people.
Yeah, I think I focus more on retaining. Whenever we post a job, we definitely get a really good response. To Richie's point, you got to make sure that job description is very thorough. So we get a lot of people, coming in, and sometimes they're right for the job, sometimes they're not, obviously. But I do market this site as a learning site, right? You might not know everything. We can teach it for the most part, but I look for someone who's got some urgency and who will buy into the cause, right? If you can get that person to buy into what you're trying to achieve, they'll be awesome, right? And we've seen that time and time again here is, I have a younger team. Definitely, when you try to find these people, they think that you need sports knowledge. You don't, right? Most of the people that work for the organization, they've come from outside of sports, and I think that's something important that they need to know. But also being transparent from day one, right? Letting people know that this is fast paced. There will be issues. You have to eat it, and we go to our after action, all that good stuff. But ultimately, I see that grows confidence over time, right? And if I can get a good team of confident learners, which I do have now, it's been extremely successful.
I appreciate that. And, I love that you both put the emphasis on retaining. The recruiting was one thing, but the retaining the people that you've got and creating that environment where people want to stay, I think is a big deal. And I love that both of you brought up the job descriptions. I think a lot of organizations struggle to get the right applicants coming in is because their job description had been copied and pasted for 10 years, and again, jobs change. The environment in facilities has changed just like everybody else too. And let's jump into the next section here, and we'll call this the AI effect. Okay, it's AI is impacting all of our lives. Personally, I was at a conference down in Phoenix this year, and I was a keynote, and I asked everybody in the audience, there were several hundred people, and I said, raise your hand if you've got a smartphone. Of course, everybody raises their hand. Then I said, keep your hand in the air if you've used ChatGPT this year. 99% of the people in the audience kept their hand up. I said, keep your hand up now if you've used it, if you could have said that 5 years ago. Almost every person put their hand down. That's how fast it's changed in our personal lives. Well, it's happening in facilities too. Our teams are using it. Our teams are getting smarter. And Dr. Lamar, let's start with you. Is how are you addressing this? And it's not this Terminator here, okay? That's
Yeah.
but I think that's a big stigma. Is everybody thinks it's Arnold Schwarzenegger coming to take their job. But how are you addressing that? And also the stigma around that, but also how are you looking at implementing some AI tools moving forward?
So excellent question. And we've used a lot of it. But one of the things that we joke about here at University of Miami Health System is that when it specifically comes to AI, hope is not a strategy, waiting is not a tactic, and it is certainly not an option. But we have to continue to go back to when it comes to AI, hope is not a strategy. I hope that this slows down. I hope we can get it integrated. One of the ways that we're using AI right now is pretty much the fact of it is artificial. And when we look at the limitations of artificial intelligence, is really that it can't really understand its own limitation. So, case in point, we have some systems that'll tell us the things that it would take a human 5 or 6 different systems to put one and two together to just get to the point of, hey, we have a leak in XYZ gallons of water per minute are going out. Other components where we're talking about facilities design, um, just this morning, we are designing brand new ORs. And one of the components where we implement a specific piece of equipment, let's just say our partner Striker. These are massive booms that hang from the ceiling. And within walking into previous ORs, you see holes in the wall and everything else. So one of the things that we were able to do just from the design alone, we have the staff members put on the Oculus. Right now, the design is 100% to scale. So if they go and virtually move a boom and it strikes the wall inside, it is going to strike the actual wall when we get to the facilities component. So it is one of these things where the more you get to use it, the more you'll start to see people become comfortable with it instead of becoming what I call prompt engineers. It's not necessarily that they understand what they're typing in. It's much more of if I type this, then it shall give me XYZ. And you really want AI to augment. So I always call it augmented intelligence, where you really want it helping you as compared to doing things for you.
I agree. And Maria, share some of your insights.
Well, when we're talking about staffing and retaining staff, this is where, technology can really help us. And I think that we are heading towards a very different environment in facilities management. I don't think that people are going to stay decades. I hope they will in a position. But right now, the average worker stays less than 4 years, and managers stay about 5 years. This constant push to do more with less are making people flee, right, their roles and going on to the next thing. So this is where AI can really help us with predictive maintenance and having sensors and almost self-healing themselves, like buildings being able to self-heal with, shutting off valves and letting you know if there's some fluctuations in normal activity that might be missed by staff, just monitoring themselves. So the interesting thing is trying to figure out what portions of that AI you need to invest in and where does it make the most sense. So looking at it across the board of like where do you have shortfalls with your current team, right? And then filling those gaps with the technology that is available today. So portfolio-wide intelligence is a dream. I think on all campuses because it would really help out. But right now, it's allowing systems to detect and diagnose issues that don't require someone to be necessarily out in the field. Because again, we have to do more with less, and it's only going to get worse, I think, over time.
I agree. I interviewed somebody on the podcast just this week, and we were talking about this very thing. And one of the things that he brought up were well, a couple things that he brought up really kind of tackled this, and I love this concept. He said people can't be everywhere all the time, and it's impossible for someone to remember where everything is. And he said he looked at it from the standpoint of AI is going to take some of that off of that person's shoulders, because that's part of the frustration in facilities with facilities teams is they're digging. They're just trying to find stuff to do their job. I look at AI, and he absolutely looked at AI as it's a tool in facilities. It's a tool that's going to help my team not have to remember where everything is. And to Richie's point earlier too, where that job satisfaction, I want my team to not struggle. I want my team to not, want to rip their hair out. I want them to be able to go do their job, punch out at the end of the day, and go enjoy their life, not go home and be stressed out of their minds, not be able to sleep at night, which in many organizations, that's the case because they're short staffed, because they're constantly firefighters, like Dr. Lamar said. It can be a fire every single day if you're not capturing that stuff. I really, really appreciate your insights on that. And let's jump to our next section here. And this is really kind of dovetails in from what we were just talking about, is accessing building information. I talk to people about this all the time. I do webinars on this. I speak at conferences about this. Is information is king. Information is a tool that when your team can access stuff to do their job, that's the drawings, the assets, the shut-off valves, then stuff isn't a fire drill all the time. And when I say your team, I mean everybody on a team should be able to access that stuff, not just put everything in buckets in different silos. And that's where a lot of organizations struggle. And what this looks like is really something like this: is accessing the drawings. It's accessing where is it, what is it? It's accessing equipment. Where is it, what is it? But then the intelligence comes into, well, what do I need? I talked to another guy just last week, and he said he made my mind kind of shift a little bit. And he said, well, imagine AI, it starts to tell you, listen, based off of maybe even sensor technology, that you're doing your PMs based off of a calendar, not off of the way the machine's running. That's what AI is going to start to do, is tell you, well, wait a minute, your equipment's running great. You don't need to change those filters, every month. Maybe you could change them every 2 months based off of what you're seeing as airflow and air quality. That's what AI is going to start to do. It's not a guy running out there and doing a quick reading. No, it's tools that incorporate AI that are going to start to do that. And for the panelists here, I'm curious with regards to if accessing information. Let's start with Fletcher here. What are some of the ways that and how is it impacting your team by being able to access information?
Yeah, I mean, with integration of ARC facilities and into the stadium, it's been night and day. Like I said, we lost a lot of institutional knowledge, but we also were working on as builds, right? Nothing digital, a stack of blueprints that are multiple iterations of projects. Can't find permits, can't find XYZ, going through really heavy capital projects over the past 2 years. First thing they ask is, can I see building plans? Well, you can, but you can see them from 1996, right? So, not having that for, the first 3 years was very harmful, not only in planning, but also every day, real time, where is this, right? We're searching for it. We're looking through walls. We're up in the ceilings. We don't know where everything is. We don't know how many assets we have. And getting the software kind of integrated into the team, over the past, 4 or 5 months has just been night and day. We're already starting to restructure our preventive maintenance program, already starting to make sure that, assets are being tagged and, maintenance regularly. Ultimately, I already see the dollars coming back in, and it's been night and day for sure.
That's great. And Richie, what are some of the ways that you're looking and working with your building information? I know you talked a little bit about some of the ways, but share some of the ways that you're accessing information, and how's that helping your team, the new hires and the people who've been there for a while?
Yeah, great question, David. I'm gonna acknowledge that we're not where we should be. Particularly as the CMMS system, computer maintenance system, garbage in, garbage out, right? And so there's some poor record keeping in asset management and other things. We are digitizing our older prints. We have buildings back to 1927.
Wow. Yeah.
And so they were on, Mylar and other things that we still have the actuals from back in the day, hand-drawn drawings, but we've since digitized them and made them available in many of our institutions. But there's a lot of way to go. There's whole bunch of topics out there like digital twins and convergence of the various systems and letting them talk to one another. I think all that's improving with technology and AI. But it's capital intense to make those moves. So you have to be strategic, particularly with the first conversation we had. Where do you want to spend your money? You want to spend it on drawing management, or do you want to spend it on a new chiller? Generally, that speaks for itself. But there's opportunity everywhere, and you don't have to start all at once, which we're doing. We're taking strategic chunks at it and managing it that way. One thing I did do in the field at our bigger hospital is we created what I was calling museum placards. So basically a big 2x2 cling on the big pieces of equipment with the year of the equipment, the brand, the model number, and then where it serves and what it does. And so anybody, especially if you're cross-training, that's what I was thinking about it, or bringing in design teams and like, hey, what's that big piece of equipment over there? Oh, that's a chiller, and it serves the floors 7 through 9. And it's connected to this cooling tower number 7 on the roof, etc. And so people understood what it did, and that seemed to help resolve some of the issues. Low budget way to do that. Took a little bit of time and effort up front to work with the facilities teams for them. The guy who knows how to tweak it and hears that noise and makes that minor adjustment to pull out of his head to create those museum placards, but they weren't really that expensive. But they do provide a lot of value, especially in the field, not going all the way digital, but in the field, you walk up to the unit. So that's how we've been doing it, but certainly a lot, we can take this much further than we've taken it so far.
You know what I love about that, though, is you took a step, and that's half the battle. Is you got to start somewhere, and I love the museum placards that you were talking about too, because half the battle when people are trying to find stuff in the building is, they're popping ceiling tiles, tracing lines, or trying to find that old drawing, or calling Richie because Richie's the only guy that knows where the thing is, because you worked on it 20 years ago. The problem is, again, a lot of orgs don't even know where to start. So it's like they're in quicksand. It's not getting any better. The equipment's not getting any younger. And knowing where that stuff is and documenting it, that's a big deal. And that's a start point. And, let's jump to the next. If it's the, what if you don't, I call it phase. It's the emergency. It's not when or not where or when it's going to happen. And the thing is, what do you do to mitigate some of that stuff? And with that, let me jump into Dr. Lamar here, and I'm going to share this before we jump in there, because this is something real time that just happened, and it was the Louvre Museum over in Paris had a water leak. 300 to 400 books are estimating were damaged, dating back to the 20th century, but or 19th century, back to the some of the newer stuff that they've got. But this just happened. Well, it's on an old system. they'd already shut it down. Someone turned the wrong nozzle and it turned the water on. And a friend of mine, when I shared this out on LinkedIn, the story out on LinkedIn, again, technology, he used one of the new AI programs to create a funny picture, and it's the Mona Lisa holding an umbrella. But that's the truth. It just happened in this facility. This happens in all facilities. I see this over and over again. Pipe burst, couldn't find it. It was spending hours trying to find a shutoff, tracing lines, and it's not pointing the finger at any one person. It's just the way we live today. A lot of organizations struggle trying to find the stuff to mitigate that. And Dr. Lamar, let's start with you. And how are you using technologies, and how are some of the ways that you're looking at how it's going to help you with improving that response and that being prepared when incidents happen?
Absolutely. And I think what I always start with is simply this. Everyone says knowledge is king. If knowledge is king, then the queen is productive human contact, because there is nothing worse than having a bunch of information that's not productive to the human that is searching for it. And we actually, here at UHealth, take the opportunity to build environments that are very specific to after action forensic reports. Meaning, the more detailed the report is, if a person can't figure something out, they can actually ask the AI prompt, hey, the last time this occurred, we had XYZ situation. What was the button or what was the sequence that we shut everything off? And it'll actually generate it based on previous responses. So what you have to do when it comes to AI, and this is much more Fletcher's thing, you have to train it. There's a training process, practice, procedure, and program for everything. So we don't necessarily look at AI as a tool for emergency preparedness. We look at AI as almost an employee that we have do very specific functions that it would just take us a lot longer to have. So the balance is understanding again, you have to use it. With the limited staff, we kind of figure out what are the common holdbacks or problems that we see when a person is trying to access information specifically for emergencies? And we test up against that with, can you generate this information within 5 minutes, 10 minutes? And then you go the opposite direction. And so far, the environment is becoming more and more productive towards human contact.
I love that. And again, it's not eliminating the human touch, it's incorporating it with the human touch. And Maria, how are you looking at technologies and information to better respond in emergencies?
Absolutely. So one of the things is doing risk assessments. Again, we mentioned this earlier on, and then trying to assess what level of information is required for each role and responsibility. And that goes beyond just your immediate staff, because we all know the catastrophic incidents that have haunted us in our careers typically happen at the most unopportune time, usually when you have a skeleton crew on, right? Holidays, weekends, middle of the night. So your vendor partners become very important to the process. And then how much information do you want to release to them, and how do they access that material as well? So this isn't a one and done. So I like what Dr. Lamar said, is like you have to constantly revisit these scenarios and adjust how you share that information. And so we like to do it quarterly. And every quarter it's a learning experience, because there's always something new. No 2 days are exactly the same. That's what makes facilities management, I think, a great career for folks that want challenges. But it's training, it's transparency, it's communication, and it's resource management at the core. Is who has access to what information, and how is that information accessed, especially out in the field, because when there is an emergency, nobody wants to be plugging into a desktop and trying to figure things out.
This has been absolutely fantastic. And I want to wrap up the webinar with asking each of you really share your passion, your perspective for what's ahead. What are we going to see? What are some of the things that are on your roadmap that you get you excited? And what are some of the things that you're planning moving forward with your team? And let's start with Maria on this one.
Oh my gosh, I think the future is bright. I think facilities management deserves a seat at the C-suite table, making decisions. It's a little bit disappointing that we've kind of gotten pushed to the hallway after COVID when we were welcome in with a warm embrace. So we have to keep fighting for that. I think there's a great opportunity here for the next generation. So if you can get out there and mentor young up and coming facilities managers, there's nothing greater. It's so rewarding. But I think technology, really analyzing the technology, helping, your staff grow. I always tell my team, fail is not really fail, it's first attempt in learning. So creating a culture where people feel safe to innovate is really where we need to go as a trade and as a career moving forward. So it's exciting. I think they're going to have more and more challenges. I think we're all going to have to, build our, grow our own money trees. But we're used to challenges. We're going to survive and we're going to thrive. But technology is going to help us, and we should embrace it.
I love that. And Fletcher.
Yeah. So, I mean, similar to that, it's really getting more in tune with that technology, especially, my staff that's taking care of some pretty antiquated, systems, critical systems, XYZ, it's bridging the gap to the new stadium. So, I mean, it's super exciting, but I don't think people realize, how much goes into that and planning and understanding that, moving a workforce from something that's 30 years old to something that is 2030 rated is going to be a huge learning curve, and not only for them but for me as well, right? But essentially, excited to keep going down this pathway. Sustainability, energy performance, especially in this area. I'm sure Richie understands, BEPS and all the things coming down the road, benchmarking, all the fun stuff, and again, trying to bridge that gap to a place that kind of lacks on that front, and trying to get to a new place where we can really perform well. But it's been really great being part of this panel. It's awesome to learn from seasoned professionals for sure.
I appreciate that. And Richie, share your insights.
Yeah, Fletcher hit on it directly. I think for me, doing things differently than we used to, particularly in new building construction, is really exciting. Not putting in gas-fired boilers as an example, and thinking about heat pump technologies, thinking about and installing geothermal technology, building tighter envelopes so that the building operates better with a better energy use intensity, developing kitchens that don't need natural gas to support their efforts, and again, reducing carbon emissions, all without costing more capital or more money. So I'm going to tell you guys that there are ways to do it. When you do the math and you do the head-to-head comparison from a first cost perspective, it could even out. But a long-term perspective, it definitely, reducing carbon emissions, avoiding fines, other things. I don't know if you in your organization or in your area are seeing fines yet for carbon emissions, but if it's not in your neighborhood, it's coming soon. I'm just telling you that. And so just doing things differently, embracing AI technologies, encouraging the young people to come into our organization and train them up and pass the baton. Those are the things that are really exciting to me, because I have approximately 10 to 15 years left in this arena before I hang up my hat. Yeah, there's a lot of gray there, but I wouldn't call myself quite part of the silver tsunami yet, but we have an obligation at particularly me at my age in passing the baton, and I'm really looking forward to what that next level of talent's going to do for the buildings that we own and operate.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing your insights there as well. And Dr. Lamar, why don't you wrap us up here?
I think to be a person that the baton perhaps is being passed to, I am pushing forward. Maybe I should run for president. Facilities first. right? And here's the reason why. I think all too often, just like Maria said, we get pushed out into the hallway. But when you look at the history of humans, the first thing we do is build something. Either it's a structure or it's a relationship. And anytime I get into a situation where we're getting pushed to the hallway, I say, okay, then do it in the street. And immediately it comes back to, oh, well, we need a place. So we need a building. We need exactly. You can't treat a patient out in the middle of nowhere. You don't hold a function without there being some type of facility around it to host that organization. So it's these things that we as a group just need to push back because a lot of the times what we're seeing is other professionals are having higher degree voices being put into the situation, not necessarily because of it's just facilities operations, but a lot of people don't understand what we do until the very thing that they work in is impacted. So keep facilities first, keep everyone with the understanding that it is okay to have a priority to something else. But if you design it wrong, you build it wrong, the operation is going to be wrong. And we want to make sure that we put people first, which is just our history. We need to build correctly.
I love that. And thank you all for joining us on the webinar today. I think this has been phenomenal. There's been an underlying theme that I'm hearing here, and it's facilities has a seat at that table. It's just establishing what that is in your organization. You really need to do that. I really, really appreciate and thank all of our panelists for sharing their insights here. And Dira, think we lost Indira.
Apologies. Thank you, everybody, for a great discussion. We unfortunately don't have time for questions, but we did have some people asking about the recording. That'll go out by tomorrow to everybody who registered. I've put a couple things in the chat there for some folks who were asking about some of the screenshots you were showing, David. A couple of people were wondering about Richie's app called Facronym. So that's pretty clever, Richie. I love that. I'll have to check that out. Also, we do have a special year-end incentive for new customers. You can click on that QR code if you want to learn more. We are going to put together a blog summary of all the key points discussed and shared by the panelists because there's just so much good information. We're going to share that with you in a follow-up email as well. Please be sure to check out the Facility Voices podcast if you haven't already, with the host David Trask, of course. David, I know you're planning out for the coming year, so do you want to say anything else about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Anybody who's interested in sharing their story, sharing some of the initiatives that you have going on at your facilities, please reach out to me. My contact information is down there. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I've been extremely fortunate that we're coming up on nearly 100 episodes, and everybody on this panel has been a guest, and they've shared just some tremendous insights on what they're doing in their facilities. That's the purpose of the podcast, is share your story, share that with industry peers, and everybody has been an open book, and it's been wonderful. So if you've got an initiative that you're working on, or you've got something you're really excited about, or even in an unusual career path, reach out. Love to have that discussion.
Yeah, and for any questions that came in that we didn't get to, I will have those, and I'll make sure that we reach out to you individually. If you want to reach out to any of the panelists, just let us know. We'll make sure to connect you. Thanks again, everybody. We really appreciate the great discussion, and everybody have a wonderful day. Take care.